Captain Rowan Hayes studied the alien vessel through the viewport of his cargo ship, the Midnight Runner. The ship's crystalline hull gleamed against the rust-red backdrop of Mars' larger moon, Phobos. Its design was unmistakably Novali, all sharp angles and translucent surfaces that seemed to catch and bend the starlight. "They're early," muttered Isabella Martinez, his second-in-command, as she checked the sensor readings. "Novali are never early. Something's got them spooked." Hayes nodded, running a hand through his graying hair. After 20 years in the Terran Republic's Special Operations Command and another 5 running logistics consulting in the Outer Rim, he'd developed a sixth sense for when things were about to go sideways. Right now, that sense was screaming at him. The comm system crackled to life. "Human vessel, this is Delegate Kairval of the Novali Resistance. Requesting permission to dock." Hayes exchanged a look with Isabella before responding. "Granted, Delegate. Follow our guidance beacon to docking port 3. The Novali ship's approach was precise, almost mechanical. Hayes watched as the docking tubes extended and sealed, creating a pressurized pathway between the vessels. The airlock cycled, and 3 figures emerged. The Novali were tall, their bodies covered in iridescent scales that shifted color with their movements. Kairval led the group, distinguished by the ceremonial markings etched into his scales. Behind him stood 2 guards, their hands never far from the energy weapons at their sides. Captain Hayes, Kairval's translator, rendered his clicking speech into smooth English. "We appreciate your discretion in this matter." Hayes gestured toward the cargo hold. "The merchandise is ready for inspection. Though I have to ask, why the rush? Our arrangement wasn't due for another 3 days." Kairval's scales rippled with dark patterns, a sign of distress, Hayes had learned. "The coalition forces have increased their patrols. They've begun using new scanning technologies that can detect quantum signatures from our traditional defense systems. Making them useless," Isabella concluded. "Precisely. Our people need weapons that can't be traced, can't be detected. Primitive, by your standards, but effective," Hayes finished. He led them to a row of sealed containers. 20,000 kinetic rifles, 5,000 conventional explosive devices, and enough ammunition to keep your resistance supplied for a standard year. All completely primitive, no quantum signatures, no energy readings. The Novali guards began scanning the containers while Kairval spoke. "The coalition believes they can subjugate our colonies through superior technology. They forget that history's greatest battles were won not by the most advanced weapons, but by the most determined warriors." Hayes thought of his own time in the service, of watching humanity claw its way onto the galactic stage through sheer stubbornness and ingenuity. They always underestimate the simple solutions. A guard approached Kairval, chittering rapidly in their native tongue. The delegate's scales shifted to a deep blue of satisfaction. "The merchandise is acceptable. Transfer the payment." Isabella checked her tablet as encrypted cryptocurrency flowed into their accounts. "Payment confirmed." "Then our business is concluded," Kairval said. "Though I suspect we will require your services again soon. The coalition's expansion grows more aggressive by the day." As Hayes watched the Novali return to their ship, Isabella moved closer. "You know what this means, right? If the coalition is developing new scanning tech, all our other clients are going to come knocking. And they'll all want the same thing, weapons so old they're new again." Hayes smiled grimly. "Get on the comm to our friends in the salvage business. Tell them we need everything they can find from the pre-quantum era. And contact Admiral Jensen, she'll want to know about these new scanners." The Novali ship detached and disappeared into the darkness of space, leaving Hayes to contemplate the changing tides of galactic politics. Humanity had fought its way to recognition among the stars, but sometimes he wondered if their greatest contribution to galactic civilization would be remembering the old ways of warfare that the other species had forgotten. "Plot a course for Europa Station," he told Isabella. I have a feeling we're about to be very, very busy. As the Midnight Runner's engines hummed to life, Hayes thought about the weapons they'd just sold, simple, reliable tools that had served humanity for centuries. In a galaxy of quantum computers and antimatter drives, sometimes the best solutions were the ones that had worked for thousands of years. The stars stretched into lines as they jumped to FTL, carrying them toward their next deal, their next crisis, their next contribution to the endless dance of power among the stars. Ambassador Diane Wilson stood at the window of her office in the Galactic Coalition's headquarters on Europa Station, watching the ice storms rage across the moon's crystalline surface. The message playing on her holoscreen was causing an even bigger storm in diplomatic circles. The Coalition condemns this blatant interference in internal matters. The Archidon representative's tentacles writhed with barely contained fury. Our scans have confirmed that Novali insurgents are using Terran-made weapons. This violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty cannot go unanswered. Wilson paused the recording and turned to her security chief, Commander James Rodriguez. How bad is it? Bad, Rodriguez replied, his cybernetic eye whirring as it processed data. We've got confirmed reports of Terran-made kinetic weapons being used in 3 different systems. The Novali resistance dropped a bunker buster on the Coalition's primary command center in the Rigel sector. Old tech, but effective, took out their quantum shields like they weren't even there. Because they were designed to stop energy weapons, not chunks of metal moving at hypersonic speeds. Wilson massaged her temples. Do we know who's supplying them? We have suspicions. Several former military officers have been running, consulting operations in the Outer Rim. Captain Rowan Hayes's name keeps coming up. Wilson knew the name. Hayes had been decorated during the First Contact War, when humanity had to prove it wouldn't be pushed around by the more established species. Have you brought this to naval intelligence? That's another problem. Rodriguez handed her a secure tablet. Read this. The document was heavily redacted, but what Wilson could see made her blood run cold. Naval intelligence hadn't just known about the weapons trafficking, they'd been facilitating it. The policy had a name, Operation Retrograde. They're deliberately introducing old human weapons into the galactic arms market, Wilson said slowly. Why? Think about it, Rodriguez leaned forward. The Coalition's technological advantage has always been their edge. But their defenses are specialized, designed to counter modern energy weapons, quantum torpedoes, nanite swarms. They never bother defending against ballistics because nobody uses them anymore. Nobody except humans. Wilson pulled up another report. And now every resistance movement and separatist group in the sector is buying our obsolete weapons. The comm system chimed. Ambassador, the Coalition Security Council is convening an emergency session. They're demanding a Terran representative appear to answer charges. Wilson straightened her uniform. Tell them I'm on my way. And get me a secure line to Earth Command. They need to know what's coming. The council chamber was a vast amphitheater, with representatives from 100 species arranged in concentric rings. Wilson felt their eyes on her as she took her place at the podium. The Archidon speaker rose, bioluminescent patterns flashing across its skin. The evidence is clear. Terran weapons are being used to destabilize legitimate Coalition authority. How does the Republic respond? Wilson activated her own holoscreen, displaying historical footage. The Republic reminds the Council that these weapons, which you call primitive, were used to defend Earth when the Coalition attempted to force us into client-state status 20 years ago. They were effective then, and they're effective now. Perhaps the question isn't why these weapons are being sold, but why so many of your subject peoples are willing to buy them. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Arcadan's skin flashed crimson. Are you suggesting the Coalition's peacekeeping operations justify armed rebellion? I'm suggesting that calling something peacekeeping doesn't make it so. Wilson's voice was steel. The Republic maintains its right to conduct legitimate arms trade with independent worlds and recognized resistance movements under the Galactic Commerce Acts of 2157. This body does not recognize the legitimacy of terrorist organizations. No. Wilson brought up another display, the Coalition's original treaty with Earth, the one they tried to force humanity to sign. 20 years ago, you didn't recognize our legitimacy either. You called us primitives, demanded we submit to your authority. We declined, and our primitive weapons proved quite effective at making our point. Perhaps history is repeating itself. The chamber erupted in shouts and threats. Wilson stood firm, knowing that somewhere out on the rim, ships like the Midnight Runner were continuing their deliveries. The galaxy was changing, and humanity's old weapons were helping to level a playing field that had been tilted for too long. As she left the chamber, her comm unit buzzed. A message from Earth Command, Operation Retrograde proceeds as planned. Continue diplomatic cover. The balance of power must be maintained. Wilson smiled grimly. The Coalition was about to learn what humanity had known for centuries. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways, and underestimating primitive weapons was a mistake that only needed to be made once. The neon lights of New Singapore's underground district reflected off the rain-slicked streets, casting multicolored shadows through the steam rising from the city's thermal vents. Zara Patel, formerly of Terran Military Intelligence and now the sector's most connected information broker, watched the crowds from her private booth in the Last Stand, a bar notorious for its clientele of mercenaries, arms dealers, and political revolutionaries. Your usual, Ms. Patel, the android bartender asked, its chrome surface reflecting the holographic advertisements that floated outside. Not tonight, Victor. I'm expecting company. Zara's augmented eyes scanned the crowd, picking out at least 12 different species mixed among the humans. All of them were armed, most illegally. Just another night in the gray markets of human space. A figure detached itself from the shadows, Captain Hayes, looking more weathered than when she'd last seen him. Busy night, he said, sliding into the booth. Getting busier. Coalition's offering big rewards for information on arms suppliers. Your name came up. Hayes smiled thinly. I'm sure it did. That's why I'm here. We need to coordinate, things are moving faster than expected. Zara's neural implant pinged, warning her of surveillance devices activating nearby. She activated the booth's privacy field, watching as a shimmer of quantum static surrounded them. Talk. The Novali resistance was just the beginning. We've got the Krith Collective asking for shipments. The Centaurian Free States too. Even the Proxima colonies are putting out feelers. All former Coalition protectorates, Zara noted. All with grievances. And all willing to pay premium for weapons that can bypass Coalition defenses. Hayes leaned forward. But here's the thing, someone's coordinating them. These aren't just random uprisings anymore. There's a pattern. Zara pulled up data on her neural display, projecting it into the air between them. Star systems lit up in red, showing conflict zones where human weapons had been used. You're right. The attacks are synchronized. Each one targets Coalition infrastructure in a way that compounds the damage of the others. Almost like someone with military training is advising them, Hayes said meaningfully. Operation Retrograde. Zara spoke the word softly, watching Hayes's reaction. You know about it? I suspected. The military contacts, the intelligence support, the diplomatic cover, it's too coordinated to be random arms dealers. A new figure approached their booth, Isabella Martinez, Hayes's second-in-command. We've got trouble. Coalition peacekeepers just raided our warehouse on Europa. They found nothing, but they're getting closer. Zara's implant flashed another warning. They're not the only ones. The Archidon Supremacy has hired the Ghost Syndicate to track down the weapon suppliers. Professional hunters, and they don't care about jurisdictional boundaries. Hayes cursed softly. The coalition's really getting desperate if they're hiring outlaws. Desperate people make mistakes, Isabella said. Like forgetting that humans wrote the book on asymmetric warfare. We've been the underdogs before. Zara brought up another display, this one showing financial transactions flowing through hidden accounts. The money trail is interesting. Every time the coalition cracks down, more groups reach out for weapons. They're creating their own opposition. And we're helping it grow, Hayes said. But something bigger is coming. These resistance movements, they're starting to talk to each other. Share resources, coordinate strategies. A united front? Isabella asked. More like a delayed reaction, Zara replied. The coalition spent centuries building an empire based on technological superiority. Now that superiority is being undermined by primitive, human weapons, the whole system is destabilizing. Hayes's comm unit buzzed. He checked it and stood quickly. We've got a shipment waiting. Zara, can you make sure our route stays clear? Already done. But watch yourselves, Ghost Syndicate hunters are in the system. They're using some new tracking technology. Let them come, Isabella said, checking her very illegal, very primitive projectile pistol. Some problems can't be solved with fancy tech. After they left, Zara sat back and accessed her secure channels. Messages flowed in from across human space, weapon shipments, troop movements, intelligence reports. Operation Retrograde was accelerating, pushing the galaxy toward a tipping point. She composed a message to her handler in Earth Command, Phase 3 proceeding as planned. Coalition forces spreading thin. Resistance movements gaining momentum. Recommend implementing Phase 4 ahead of schedule. The response came back almost immediately, approved. The balance of power shifts. Old weapons wake ancient fears. Let them remember why they once feared the sound of gunfire. Outside, the rain continued to fall on New Singapore's neon-lit streets, washing away the traces of deals made in shadows, while across the galaxy, the weapons of humanity's past were shaping its future. Admiral Catherine Wei stood on the bridge of the TRS Challenger, watching the tactical display with growing concern. Dozens of red dots indicated coalition ships converging on a civilian transport near the Proxima border. The transport's ID signature matched one of Hayes's vessels. They're not even trying to be subtle anymore, her XO, Commander Jackson, observed. That's 3 battle groups for one transport. Because they know what's on it, Wei replied. Status of our patrol squadrons. Strike Group 7 is closest, about 30 minutes out at maximum burn. But if we intervene directly, it's an act of war. Wei finished. She opened a secure channel to Earth Command, knowing what the response would be but required by protocol to ask. Request permission to assist civilian vessel under coalition interdiction. The response was immediate, denied. Maintain current position. Operation Retrograde parameters remain in effect. Wei closed the channel, her jaw tight. Saved by bureaucracy, Jackson muttered. The transport's moving, a sensor officer called out. They're making a run for the Kuiper debris field. Wei allowed herself a small smile. The debris field, remnants of an ancient battle between human and coalition forces, was notorious for playing havoc with advanced targeting systems. But old-fashioned visual tracking still worked just fine, if you knew how to use it. Ma'am, the comm officer interrupted. Priority message from Europa Station. The Novali resistance just hit 3 coalition command centers simultaneously. They're using nuclear weapons. The bridge fell silent. Nuclear weapons had been banned by galactic treaty for centuries. Their use changed everything. Wei's secure comm crackled. Ambassador Wilson's voice came through, tense but controlled. Admiral, the Coalition Security Council is convening an emergency session. They're voting on a resolution to impose a full blockade of human space. They can't be serious, Jackson protested. The economic damage alone. They're scared, Wei said quietly. For the first time in centuries, they're not the most powerful force in the galaxy. Fear makes people do stupid things. New alerts flashed across the tactical display. Coalition forces were mobilizing across multiple sectors. The Archidon Supremacy had declared a state of emergency. The Ghost Syndicate's hunters were being granted emergency enforcement powers. Wei's neural link pulsed with a priority override. The message was coded at the highest level, direct from the head of Operation Retrograde. Phase 4 is now active. Ghost Protocol authorized. Good hunting. Commander Jackson, Wei said formally. Send to all Terran Republic vessels in the sector, authentication code Omega-7 Delta. Operation Ghost Protocol is now in effect. Jackson's eyes widened as he processed the implications. Already? That's 3 months ahead of schedule. Because the coalition forced our hand. Wei turned to her crew. Battle stations. And bring up the old targeting systems, the ones we kept despite coalition regulations saying they were obsolete. Across human space, hidden weapons platforms were powering up. Sleeper agents were being activated. And in a dozen secret shipyards, vessels that had been disguised as civilian transports were shedding their false signatures, revealing warships built with a combination of modern technology and primitive human engineering. On the tactical display, the coalition forces surrounding Hayes's transport suddenly had much bigger problems to worry about. Strike Group 7, now revealing its true nature, was no longer 30 minutes away, it was right on top of them, having been hidden in the debris field all along. The coalition wanted to remind everyone why they were once the dominant force in the galaxy, Wei said, watching as the battle began to unfold. Instead, they're about to remind everyone why humans had to be forced to sign those weapons treaties in the first place. Her neural link buzzed again, a message from Zara Patel, Ghost Syndicate hunters are pulling back. They say they weren't paid enough to fight a war. Smart mercenaries. All stations, Wei commanded. Prepare for combat. And power up the kinetic artillery batteries. Let's show them why sometimes the old ways are best. The Challenger's ancient weapon systems, hidden beneath layers of modern technology, hummed to life. Across the sector, other human ships were doing the same, revealing capabilities that the coalition had dismissed as obsolete centuries ago. Wei thought of all the times humanity had been mocked for keeping these primitive weapons operational. Now those same weapons were about to change the balance of power in the galaxy. Again. Message from the transport, the comm officer reported. Captain Hayes says to thank you for the dramatic timing. Tell him he still owes me a drink from the last war, Wei replied, allowing herself a moment of grim humor before focusing on the battle to come. And tell him to get clear. Things are about to get very primitive around here. The Coalition Security Council chamber was eerily quiet, its usual bustle replaced by the tense silence of defeat. Ambassador Wilson stood at the center, surrounded by the representatives of a dozen alien species who had, until recently, considered humanity a minor inconvenience in galactic politics. The terms are non-negotiable, Wilson stated, her voice carrying across the chamber. The coalition will recognize the independence of all worlds that have declared sovereignty during this conflict. The weapons treaties will be renegotiated to acknowledge humanity's right to maintain its traditional military capabilities. The Archidon speaker's skin flashed patterns of distress and anger. You planned this. All of it. Operation Retrograde wasn't just about selling weapons, it was about destabilizing the entire galactic order. No, Wilson corrected. It was about correcting an imbalance. You tried to force humanity to abandon its heritage, to rely solely on your approved technologies. We agreed publicly, but we never stopped preparing for the day you try to use that technological gap against us. High above the council chamber, the Midnight Runner docked with Admiral Wei's flagship. Captain Hayes stepped onto the bridge, where Wei and Zara Patel were watching the negotiations via secure feed. The Ghost Syndicate's gone to ground, Zara reported. Their hunters learned the hard way that their fancy quantum tracking systems don't work so well against ballistic rounds. Hayes nodded. And the Novali? Already signing treaties with the other newly independent worlds, Wei answered. They're calling it the Rim Confederation. A counterbalance to coalition influence. On the screen, the negotiations continued. The coalition representatives were reviewing casualty reports, damage assessments, lists of systems lost to rebellion. Their mighty fleets, optimized for energy weapon combat and quantum warfare, had proved surprisingly vulnerable to mass driver rounds and nuclear-tipped missiles. You used our own prejudices against us, the Archidon speaker accused. We were so convinced of our technological superiority that we never considered you might be advancing in different directions. Wilson smiled diplomatically. Humanity never stopped developing new technologies. We just remembered not to abandon the old ones. Sometimes a railgun is more effective than a plasma cannon. Sometimes traditional explosives work better than quantum warheads. And now every rebellious world in the galaxy has access to these weapons, another representative growled. They always had access, Hayes muttered, watching from the bridge. We just showed them how to use them effectively. Wei turned to her old friend. The coalition's already adapting. Their new ships will have protection against kinetic weapons, nuclear devices, all the primitive tools we used against them. Let them adapt, Zara said, her augmented eyes scanning incoming data streams. By the time they do, we'll have something new. Or something old made new again. That's what they never understood about humans, we don't just move forward, we build on our past. The council chamber feed showed the coalition representatives signing the peace accords. Wilson's expression remained neutral, but Hayes could see the satisfaction in her stance. Humanity had fought its way to the negotiating table not through technological superiority, but through the careful cultivation of its military heritage. Message from Earth Command, Wei's comm officer announced. Operation Retrograde is officially concluded. All agents are to stand down. Stand down. Hayes laughed. We just reshaped the galaxy. What do they expect us to do now? What we always do, Wei replied. Prepare for the next war while working for peace. The coalition won't forget this defeat easily. And there are other powers out there, watching and learning. Speaking of learning, Zara interjected, the Rim Confederation is already requesting military advisors. They want to understand how we maintained our primitive capabilities without detection. And weapons, Hayes added. They'll want more weapons. Wilson's voice came through their secure channel as she left the council chamber. Then we'll teach them. Not just how to use the weapons, but why we kept them. Every rail gun and missile battery is a piece of human history, a lesson learned in blood. The galaxy needs to understand that progress doesn't always mean abandoning the past. The Midnight Runner's crew began preparations for their next run, but this time they wouldn't be smuggling weapons through blockades. They would be delivering them openly, legally, teaching others the lessons humanity had never forgotten. You know what this means, Hayes said to Wei and Zara as they watched the coalition ships withdraw from human space. Everything changes now. No, Wei corrected, thinking of the ancient weapons that had just reshaped the balance of power. Everything already changed. They just finally noticed. In the depths of space, human ships resumed their patrols, carrying both the latest quantum technologies and the primitive weapons that had proven so decisive. They were living reminders that sometimes the old ways were the best ways, and that understanding your past was the key to securing your future.